In this episode, we turn to a topic that can sound highly managerial at first, yet becomes very practical once you understand what problem it is really trying to solve. Organizations cannot improve cybersecurity just by hoping their controls are working, and they cannot lead responsibly if they only hear about security when something has already gone badly wrong. That is why measurement matters. It gives the organization a way to see whether important protections are in place, whether risk is rising or falling, and whether people are actually doing what the security program expects them to do. For beginners, this topic becomes much easier when you stop imagining measurement as spreadsheets for their own sake and start hearing it as a visibility system. Good measurement helps leaders, managers, and teams answer a simple but important question, which is whether the organization is becoming safer, staying exposed, or drifting into trouble without noticing quickly enough. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Author.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong security program needs more than activity. It needs evidence that the activity is producing useful results. An organization may hold training sessions, buy tools, review logs, write policies, and talk often about risk, but none of that automatically proves the security program is effective. Effectiveness means the organization is reducing meaningful exposure, improving its ability to detect and respond, and supporting the mission in a way that can be observed over time. That is why measurement is so important. Without it, leaders are left with impressions, opinions, and isolated stories instead of a more reliable picture of what is actually happening. Beginners should notice that this is not only about proving success. It is also about spotting weakness early enough to do something about it. Good measurement makes hidden problems harder to ignore because it can show missed reviews, rising risk trends, slow response patterns, poor follow-through, or repeating control failures before those issues grow into larger operational or business harm. One of the first useful distinctions is the difference between raw data and a meaningful measure. Raw data is simply information that has been collected, such as counts, timestamps, alerts, inventories, or records of completed tasks. A meaningful measure takes some part of that data and turns it into something the organization can use to judge security conditions more clearly. If a team says it handled 2,000 alerts last month, that may sound impressive, but by itself it says very little about whether risk was reduced or whether the alerts mattered. A stronger measure would help answer a more useful question, such as whether critical alerts are being investigated fast enough, whether risky systems are going too long without review, or whether repeated problems are appearing in the same business area. Beginners often assume that more data automatically creates more understanding, but that is not true. A flood of numbers can make things harder to understand if the numbers are not tied to decisions, priorities, or meaningful risk. That brings us to Key Risk Indicator, KRI, which is one of the most useful concepts in the title because it helps organizations notice conditions that may signal rising exposure or weakening control before a major incident occurs. A KRI is not just any number that appears on a chart. It is a measure selected because it tells the organization something important about the level or direction of risk in an area that matters. This is a big shift for beginners because it means measurement is not mainly about counting everything possible. It is about watching the indicators that actually help the organization notice when trouble may be building. A KRI might show that critical access reviews are overdue, that a growing percentage of important systems are falling behind on required maintenance, or that incident response timing is worsening in ways that suggest strain or weak process. The value of a KRI is not that it predicts the future with certainty. The value is that it gives leaders a stronger chance to see a meaningful warning before harm becomes harder to contain. A good KRI usually has 3 qualities that make it especially useful. First, it connects to a real risk the organization cares about rather than to a random task that happens to be easy to count. Second, it can be tracked consistently enough that people can notice direction and change instead of staring at isolated numbers with no context. Third, it points toward action because a security measure that creates no possible response may create awareness without improving anything. For beginners, This is an important lesson because it keeps the topic grounded in practical decision-making. If a KRI shows that high-risk exceptions are accumulating faster than they are being resolved, that should lead to questions about ownership, resources, or control design. If a KRI shows that access removal after employee departure is taking too long, that should drive process review and follow through. The indicator matters because it makes risk visible in time for action, not because the number itself is inherently interesting. Dashboards help turn that visibility into something people can absorb more quickly. A dashboard is usually a visual view of selected security measures presented in a way that lets the audience see current conditions, patterns, and areas needing attention without reading a long narrative first. Dashboards are valuable because they reduce the time needed to notice whether things appear stable, improving, or concerning. A well-designed dashboard helps leaders and teams answer questions such as where risk is growing, which business units are behind on obligations, whether incident patterns are changing, and whether core processes are meeting expected timing. For beginners, the key idea is that a dashboard is not just decoration. It is a tool for situational awareness. When good measures are displayed clearly, the organization can see more quickly where attention is needed. When dashboards are cluttered, vague, or overloaded with low-value numbers, they create the appearance of insight without giving the audience a clear sense of what actually deserves concern or follow-up. A strong dashboard is selective because trying to place every possible measure in one view usually produces confusion rather than clarity. Not every security number belongs in front of every audience, and not every piece of data deserves equal visual importance. A good dashboard focuses on measures that matter most to the people using it, highlights movement or thresholds that deserve attention, and supports quick understanding of whether the environment is healthy or needs intervention. Beginners often imagine that the best dashboard is the one with the most information, but the opposite is usually closer to the truth. The best dashboard helps the viewer understand the security picture faster, not slower. If an executive opens a security dashboard, that person should be able to see where risk is high, where obligations are being missed, and where performance is drifting without needing to decode a wall of unrelated numbers. Dashboards work best when they simplify the path from observation to question and from question to action. Scorecards serve a related but slightly different purpose. While a dashboard often emphasizes current visibility and quick monitoring, a scorecard is more likely to present performance against defined expectations, targets, or goals over time. A scorecard helps an organization ask whether it is meeting the standards it set for itself in areas that matter, such as review completion, control coverage, response timing, policy adherence, or reduction of known risk items. For beginners, it helps to think of a scorecard as a more judgment-oriented view. A dashboard may show what is happening, while a scorecard helps show how performance compares to what should be happening. This distinction matters because cybersecurity effectiveness is not only about seeing conditions. It is also about evaluating whether the program is achieving the level of discipline and follow-through the organization claims to expect. A scorecard helps create that accountability by making performance more visible against a standard instead of leaving people to interpret isolated numbers without any shared reference point. Reports add another important layer because numbers and visuals alone rarely tell the full story. A report gives narrative context that helps explain what changed, why it matters, what may be causing the pattern, and what action is recommended next. This is especially valuable in cybersecurity because the same number can mean different things depending on the environment. An increase in reported suspicious messages might reflect a worsening threat situation, but it might also reflect better employee awareness and faster reporting culture. A report helps the organization interpret the measure instead of reacting blindly to the figure itself. For beginners, this is a crucial point. Good reporting is not about repeating the dashboard in paragraph form. It is about making the information understandable enough that leaders and managers can make better decisions. Reports connect measurement to meaning, and meaning is what turns a security program from a collection of metrics into a learning system that notices change, explains significance, and guides the next step responsibly. Another important lesson is that measures should connect to business and mission reality rather than floating in a technical bubble. Cybersecurity is supposed to support trustworthy operation, protect important information, reduce meaningful exposure, and help the organization continue serving its purpose. That means the best measures are often the ones that show whether those outcomes are becoming more or less likely. Beginners sometimes get drawn toward technical counts because they sound precise, but a precise number is not automatically useful if it does not reflect something the organization truly needs to understand. A measure about overdue access reviews matters because excess access creates real exposure. A measure about recovery timing matters because downtime affects continuity. A measure about unresolved high-risk findings matters because it shows where known weakness remains exposed. When measurement connects to things the organization genuinely cares about, it becomes easier for non-technical leaders to support security action because the measures no longer sound like specialist trivia. They sound like business risk made visible in a more disciplined way. It is also helpful to distinguish between indicators that show something after it has happened and indicators that help reveal conditions building before a larger problem occurs. Both types matter, but they serve different purposes. A measure showing how many significant incidents occurred last quarter can help the organization understand what harm has already happened. A measure showing that critical control reviews are being missed or that patching delays are growing may help reveal the conditions that increase the chance of future harm. For beginners, this difference matters because strong measurement should not only explain the past. It should also help the organization act before the next problem becomes more expensive or disruptive. That is one reason KRIs are so valuable in planning and oversight. They help shift security from pure reaction toward more informed anticipation. No indicator can eliminate uncertainty, but useful indicators can help reduce surprise by showing patterns, backlogs, drift, or weakening discipline before those issues create an incident that forces emergency attention. Audience matters a great deal in cybersecurity measurement because different groups need different levels of detail and different types of explanation. Senior leadership may need a concise view of top risks, major trends, unresolved exposure, and business impact. Operational managers may need more detail on overdue actions, control performance, process failures, and team ownership. Security practitioners may need even more specific information to support remediation, tuning, investigation, and follow-through. A beginner should understand that the same measure can be presented differently depending on who needs it and why. This does not mean changing the truth for different audiences. It means presenting the information in a form that supports the decisions that audience is expected to make. A report to executive leadership that drowns in operational detail may fail because it hides the big picture. A report to a working team that is too high-level may fail because it does not identify what actually needs to be fixed. Good measurement supports action by matching the view to the responsibility of the audience. There are also several common mistakes that can make measurement less useful than it appears. One of the biggest is relying on vanity metrics, which are numbers that may look impressive but do not actually reveal much about risk or effectiveness. Large counts of blocked events, completed scans, or training completions may sound reassuring. Yet without context, they may not tell the organization whether real exposure is shrinking, whether important controls are functioning, or whether behavior is improving. Another mistake is measuring so many things that no one can tell what matters most. A third mistake is choosing measures that accidentally encourage the wrong behavior, such as pushing teams to close items quickly rather than resolve them well. Beginners should hear this clearly because measurement is not automatically wise just because it uses charts and percentages. Bad measurement can create false confidence, distorted incentives, or distraction from the issues that deserve the most attention. That is why thoughtful selection of measures is part of cybersecurity judgment, not just part of administrative routine. Measurement becomes far more powerful when it is tied to regular review and real accountability. A dashboard that no one checks, a scorecard that is never discussed, or a report that is filed away without decision or follow-up does little to improve security. The real value appears when the organization uses measurement to ask harder questions, assign ownership, remove obstacles, and revisit whether prior actions actually change the situation. If repeated reports show the same high-risk issues staying open month after month, leaders should ask why progress is not occurring. If a scorecard shows that a process consistently fails in one business area, that pattern should drive conversation and support rather than passive observation. Beginners should notice that the goal of measurement is not surveillance for its own sake. It is guided improvement. A mature organization does not merely admire its metrics. It uses them to learn, to challenge weak assumptions, and to make more disciplined decisions about where effort, leadership attention, and resources need to go next. As we close, remember that measuring cybersecurity effectiveness is about making risk, performance, and follow-through visible enough that the organization can act with greater clarity and less guesswork. Key risk indicators help show where exposure may be rising or where control discipline may be weakening before larger damage occurs. Dashboards provide quick visibility into current conditions and important patterns. Scorecards compare performance to defined expectations so accountability becomes clearer. Reports add the explanation and meaning that help numbers support good decisions instead of shallow reaction. When these tools are chosen carefully and used well, they help the organization answer whether security is improving, drifting, or quietly failing in areas that matter. That is the beginner lesson worth keeping. Measurement is not a side activity added after the real security work is done. It is one of the ways the organization sees whether the real security work is actually working. And without that visibility, even a busy security program can remain much less effective than it appears.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.